Hey everybody, Greg Poole here at Junkie Media, bojunkie.com. It's time for another podcast. Hope everybody is having a good lead up to our holidays. It is December 22nd today. It's my mom's birthday. Happy birthday, Mom. But we got the holidays coming up. We also have the ATA coming up. The Iowa Pro-Am just finished. So pretty much for any of you that are in this world, it has started officially spinning for 2026. And so kind of the big lead off for the industry for that is, of course, the ATA show. I have talked with today's guest and Bruce Cole from the NFAA prior to this. I have talked to many people about this. I'm excited about kind of this transition. Better late than never, but the current president of the ATA has been, from everything I can see, he has been turning over every rock he needs to kind of dig things up and to listen to the people he needs to listen to get things rolling in the right direction. Today's discussion, of course, what is the right direction and how much can the ATA do? What do manufacturers need to do? What do customers need to do? What do dealers need to do? That's basically what today's podcast is going to be about. As usual, this is not just going to be your normal pom-poms, cheerleaders, woohoo, come to the ATA type. That's just not how I get down. So anyway, without any further ado, it's ATA President Jeff Poole. How you doing today, brother?
Hey Greg, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You've been a busy man leading up to this to this ATA. So just kind of give us a real quick overview of how things are stacking up only a few weeks away.
Yeah, we're definitely in crunch time right now, especially with the new format that we have going from the ATA trade show, really holding down the fort to six events over 6 days, four shows, two shooting tournaments. So there's a lot of change from the show and event organization side of it, and a lot of promotion and a lot of angst, frankly, to see how this great experiment turns out here in just a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I will be there Thursday to be at the normal show. My biggest, and look, folks, I've been to plenty of ATA shows. So going to a business to business ATA show for those of us that have been doing this for a couple decades, it's cool. We get to see great people and all that kind of stuff. My interest is absolutely peaked at the transition from the ATA business to business show to what they are now calling the Archery and Bow Hunting Super Show, which is, just to boil it down, that's the consumer availability part. That's when consumers can come to the ATA show. We will get into some of those topics about how exactly that's going to go over, but let's just jump right into this, Jeff. And before we get into this, I think the first thing that we just need to acknowledge is the fact that archery is still young. We're still young. I mean, I know everybody's like, oh, 25, 30 years. 25, 30 years is not very long in the big scheme of things. And so archery as a whole, we had our heyday, things have leveled off, and now we're in the sustainability side of what our industry and our sport is going to experience for the long term. It's great, in the late, mid 90s, early 2000s, everybody's making hay while the sun is shining. That's cool. We went through the thing in 2008. We went through the COVID thing in 2020. And I think now as an industry, we're just starting to mature to the level where we will be at where a lot of other industries are. But I just want people to keep in mind in the big picture, archery, we're still kind of new at this. I won't be around, but 25 years from now, we'll be in a totally different place, and archery and the outdoor side will be on a different level. And so, with that being said, Jeff, let's talk a little bit about the consumer side of this, and specifically, I want to hear your opinion, and I don't know how much exactly you were paying attention to the ATA show before you came president, or the ATA in general, but talk a little bit about some of the discussions you guys have had leading up to, because we've been talking about a consumer day or whatever for 15 years, and it just never came to fruition because it never had to. But buying habits have changed, everything's changed. So talk a little bit about, what you saw happening with the ATA prior to you coming on board, and then the some of the hurdles that it takes to act, because changing stuff at the ATA is like, you don't just pivot. The ATA just doesn't change in a heartbeat. It's not like Jeff goes, "Yep, let's do that," and they just turn the ship. So it's a wide turn. And so kind of talk about that process for you in particular.
Yeah, Greg, it's a wide turn because ATA is an unusual organization that in that we represent both the retailer and the manufacturer. So in industry, so many organizations, associations represent one or the other. So, a lot of times the best interest of one is not necessarily the best interest of the other. When it comes to the trade show, I did have the good fortune of attending several ATA shows before coming on board. Was there during let's say, the peak years. And peak years, that was probably back in around 2016, 17, maybe even 2018. And the challenge at the time was there were so many people there that it was hard to get business done.
Right.
And so some decisions were made around that, maybe not the right decisions in the long term or the intermediate term. But the trade show itself at the time was the premier event. It was the event to attend. And what's happened since then with declining attendance on the trade show side is we've had to go to surveying members, which we've done for the last 5+ years, on this whole concept of a consumer day. What if we brought consumers in? How would you feel about that, Mr. Retailer? How would you feel like about that, Mr. Manufacturer? And that's an example of how the two feel different about bringing consumers into the show. So trying to get to a point where we could pivot and bring consumers in, not during the trade days. The trade days are they're sacred. We
Right.
won't do anything to the trade days, but bring consumers in and see this grand environment that we've created for the trade show. Manufacturers these days want to be in front of consumers. Their whole marketing and advertising campaign is directed towards consumers,
Right.
not dealers.
Right.
So being in front of them face to face is
Right.
a part of their marketing plan that they really want to execute. And we've seen how that's working for events like TAC and the success and the growth that TAC's had particularly over the last 5 years or so.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, that's no lies detected. I'll just put it that way. So let's kind of dig down into that a little bit. When we talk, and you talk about the heyday and some of the decisions back then. And look, folks, I've admitted this prior on podcasts, other podcasts, my podcast, and in person. The ATA is not solely responsible. There's plenty of blame to go around. But the manufacturers, and I was one of them, in the heyday, like I would be talking to a customer, a distributor or a dealer, and some pointy cowboy boot guy and bedazzled jeans and an affliction shirt would walk up and literally just start talking to me, and it was super irritating. But he also had a camera crew with him, and he also had a decent looking member of the opposite sex with him, and they had a whole crew, and they were everywhere. And so at the time, I don't think us as manufacturers, once again, folks, this was not the ATA. They ended up having to deal with it, but we complained. Um, they were serving a much bigger purpose than what I think any of us gave credit to, because we just couldn't see the forest through the trees. Like you said, everything was crushing. You could hear the buzz in the hallway before they opened the doors. They opened the doors and it was like a sea of humanity coming into the show. And Yeah, man, when everything's going great, it's hard to do real good self-analysis, but we complain like, hey, we need to get now, folks. I'm going to use the word media. Media means people like Bojunkie. Media means uh, a TV show that has a camera crew and they're going around talking to their sponsors, trying to talk to new sponsors. So when I say media, I mean anyone who comes to the ATA show that has a camera crew and is there to promote themselves, their products, new products, and then by default, the show. That's who I'm talking about. And so we as manufacturers kind of overreacted. And so the pendulum and the ATA responded. Well, unfortunately, because of manufacturer pressure, I think that the pendulum swung too far the other way. So now that we see what the effects are of basically getting rid of 80% of the media at the event, because you mentioned the TAC, and that's one thing that they have done spectacularly. TAC doesn't promote themselves much. They don't have to. They built their event so that the people that are coming to their event do their marketing and promotion for them. So speak a little bit about that side, Jeff, as far as it's 2026 now, pretty much, and things have changed. And so now you're trying to learn from the past and rebuild for the future. And social media, influencers, websites, YouTubes, still television shows, all of that has to play a huge role. And let's be honest, I'm a huge fan of know your role, and the ATA is not a marketing company. And so talk a little bit about maybe falling back and doing something to where you are going to encourage a lot of people, media people that come with camera crews and stuff to kind of help do your promotion for you.
Back in that heyday, that 2017 time frame, and it was viewed as so many people on the show floor that they were getting in the way of business getting done, and so they were looked at as um, folks that didn't belong at the show.
Right.
The whole benefit to the show, as you just pointed out, was completely overlooked. And so decisions were made to create what is called a buyer day. And that buyer day was the first day of the show. So what buyer day did was say, if unless you are a bona fide buyer, you are not allowed on the show floor the first day of the show. Well, that ruled out all of the media, um, anybody really that was not a bona fide buyer.
Right.
Now, it made good business sense, I guess, at the time, but as we saw, it really restricted the amount of people coming to the show overall because if they couldn't come the first day, they probably weren't coming the second day. And when you didn't have that buzz, that energy that was created on the show floor by all of those people, you weren't going to get it on the second day or the third day. So
Right.
therein sort of was the beginning of a change in how people viewed the show. There's so many fewer people at the show. Oh, the show must be in decline. The show's not delivering this or it's not delivering that because the perception was there's not anybody here. There's half as many people here as there were last year or the year before. So we changed that a couple of years ago, and it does take time for those people to come back through the doors.
100%.
Uh, so, we don't have buyer day any longer. Every day is buyer day.
Right.
Media is welcome every day of the show,
Yep.
not just the second day or the third day. And we are seeing some traction there, but it does take time to build that back. But what it did is open the door to some negativity about the show, and we started seeing then a decline in the number of retailers attending the show, which brought about a decline in the number of manufacturers attending the show. So this whole business of putting on a trade show is a chicken and the egg scenario. You need to have retailers to make the manufacturers happy, and you need manufacturers for the retailers to be happy. So when you start losing one, you really have to take a critical look at why that is and address that in a meaningful way because you only get one shot at it every year.
Right.
You don't get, every couple of months or couple of weeks, once a year. And so it's a very slow moving ship. And when you make a change, you have to make it a substantive change to see any impact, even over a multi-year period.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's, you know, all of us can remember from 2000. I don't want to date myself too much here, so I'll just fast forward a bit. We can all remember from 2013, 14 to 2019, you opened up any social media platform, your feed was full of ATA from 30, 40, basically every influencer, TV show, media, basically everyone you followed as any sort of a personality, your entire feed was full of shit from the ATA. And I say shit in a good way. And so you literally couldn't get away from it. And that's what we need to get back to. But like Jeff said, that's a slow burn. It's not like you can just be like, hey, all you guys are welcome back. And the TV shows and all the influencers are going to be like, okay, we'll be there tomorrow. That's not how it works. And so um, I definitely think that it's a step in the right direction. I think, like you said, manufacturers overreacted. I was very vocal about it. Shocker, I know. Um, that some of these media people just didn't have the common sense to see you in a conversation and wait. And that is that is just something where we all got to fall on that sword and say, hey, look, we didn't read the room correctly. So, and I have no problem doing that. And so I'm happy to hear that you guys are, recognizing that, hey, look, we're not a media, like TAC. The ATA is not a media company. We don't have the media to hire. It's like, no. So if you can learn from past mistakes and learn what's working now, and let these other media folks, and I use Ty Jordans and the Bo Disciples and Nate Illingsworth and these guys, let them do the work for you. Like, come
Right.
on, man, here's your passes. Bring, because you got all of these people, and this is something folks don't understand. All these media sources, they got to, Cam Media with Lancasters, they got to pay camera crews to be there. They got to pay PJ to be there. So it's not free. It's not like, folks just show up and it doesn't, they're also paying to come to create content and promote your event for you. So I'm happy to see that. You did mention something about dealers, resellers, the ATA show and manufacturers and all that. And let's talk about that recipe for a minute. And what I mean by that is I can remember, definitely going to age myself here, Jeff. I can remember when you didn't get the damn ATA show special and unless you was at the damn ATA show. Like, yes, if your family got sick or the snow came in and we had snowpocalypse a couple years, yes, you could get it before or after, but don't tell nobody. I can literally remember telling dealers, oh, you missed the show. All right, man. Like after the show, all right, I'll give you the ATA show special right now, but just don't be spreading that out there. Well, nowadays, and this is not the ATA's fault, folks. You could get the ATA show special a month ago, and you can get it a month from now from most manufacturers. It's a competitive market. They're trying to, sell as much product as they can. That's their jobs. But my question for you is, and I know that it's not like you can just be like, by the way, manufacturers, you can't give your ATA show special unless you're here. You can't do that. You know that. I know that. Everybody knows that. So, how do you think we can address? We can get into new product releases at the show as well, but how do you think that we as a collective can address the buying power issue? Because it's like Costco. You can be a Costco member and you can buy stuff online and get that buying power discount. But there's also stuff that is not that you have to go to the store for. And so how are you balancing getting back that buying power for the entity that is the ATA?
Well, it's a challenge. It's one of the bigger challenges we have because we are limited as an organization, the amount of influence we can exert on manufacturers and on sales rep groups to not offer show specials at any other time than the show. There's no penalties that we can place on it. We walk a fine line there. However,
All right.
we can talk to manufacturers, we can talk to sales rep groups and help them understand the the damage that that does to a trade show, ATA show, any other show, because part of the allure of the show, the attraction of the show, what brings retailers to the show is that special pricing. Now, as a trade show, and trade shows have evolved over the last 10, 20 years, whereas 20 years ago, 30 years ago, trade shows were buying shows. That was the whole basis for them. That's why people came to them. Uh, but they've really evolved well beyond just a buying show. That's still a critical element to the show.
For sure.
But the networking, the new products, when it comes to the archery industry, the ability to see the whole product line from every manufacturer out there, not just what's brought in the door from the sales rep. The shooting lanes where you can actually demo even bows. Dealers stock their two, three, four models of a manufacturer's bow, but at the show they get exposed to the full line
Right.
of bows, so they can not only try out the new products, but try out another product that they don't carry, and that's all part of the reason of coming to the show. And our focus used to be on the retailer. We came out with special promotions to make it more affordable for the retailer to come to the show. We still offer a First Nights on Us promotion. So that's $150 off of a retailer's first hotel room, first night
Nice.
at the show. And then there's on-site promotions, super deal gift card and big buck tags and things like that. So we're trying to promote business being written at the show. But this very sensitive area of preserving the integrity of the pricing special for the show is gotten a little elusive. I don't know that the fact that the ATA show is the first show of the season, and then there are the retailers are going to several shows over the next couple of months. The manufacturers are at the buy group shows the next couple of months, and they have the opportunity then after the fact to bring up that show special at the ATA show and asking them to honor that special. And in some cases, it might be looked at as the difference between closing a sale or not closing a sale.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the whole point. I mean, here several years ago, not under Jeff Poole's tenure, just put that straight out there so no one associates this with Jeff. The ATA, I don't want to say leaned on, they asked. There's nothing that they could do, but they asked. Um, bow manufacturers in particular, that because back in the day, was talking to someone about this the other day. I can remember being at the ATA show, and it would literally hit 11 o'clock, and it would literally be like rats when someone turned on the lights. All of a sudden, everybody's gone. I was going to make a Home Depot parking lot and ice joke right there, Jeff, but I didn't. But everybody's gone. And then we would all be like, oh, Hoyt or Matthews or Bowtech must be doing a bow release because everybody's gone. Everybody would go over there. You couldn't walk within 4 aisles of it. Google Tim Gillingham, Dry Fires, Burnworth's Bowtech, and you'll see some splendid ATA tomfoolery when they were doing a release and Tim Gillingham's doing a live feed in front of 500 people or more at the Bowtech booth, and he draws Jim Burnworth's bow and then just yeets it, just dry fires it. Good times. But we all knew when all of a sudden, it's like a tsunami. When all of a sudden the beach gets huge and all the water goes away, something's happening. It was the same thing at the ATA. And so here, however many years ago it was, the ATA tried to get bow manufacturers in particular to release flagship bows at the ATA. Couple did, couple didn't. It didn't work all that great. Not in that instance, not the way it was set up. I was not privy to how exactly they structured the whole thing. I just know it landed with a thud. And so, my question for you now, since we've basically established that whatever the ATA is trying to do in the ATA show special realm or new product releases is an ask, not a tell. And folks need to understand that in concrete, it's non-negotiable. When Jeff and the ATA, they're asking manufacturers to do things, they can't tell them to do things. Just want to make that crystal clear. Swarovski, what, if any, ideas do you have as far as getting that aspect of the ATA back?
When it comes to bows, and that's really driving the ship here, right? The
Correct.
bow releases in the fall of the year, in that October, November, even early December timeframe, we're seeing new product releases. Um, Not 100%, not across the board, but close to it. Um, we have refocused on the new product launch element of the trade show. Last year, we created the new product launch unveiling and happy hour. So
Right.
what draws our crowd as well as or better than new products? Free beer. So free beer at the unveiling of new products. We drew several hundred, 400 retailers to just mill around, socialize with each other, check out the new products, have a beer on us, end the day with a smile. That's the evening before the show opens. That's
Right.
the new product launch unveiling. So what it did was it demonstrated to all the manufacturers when they were there and they were invited to attend the event as well.
Right.
It really shined this huge spotlight on new products. So the number of new products that we have in our new product launch area this year is about 50% more than we had last year. Why? Because of this huge spotlight that we're shining on it now. There's a lot of new products released at the show that they don't automatically get entered into the new product launch. It's the manufacturer has to apply for it, and
Right.
we investigate it to make sure that it is in fact a new product, hadn't been out for 6 months, and then they can get it in. But some of them still elect to just keep it in their booth and have their new product announcement there. Well, now that we have this big spotlight on it, so a re-emphasis on new products is a major part of it. That alone is not going to change bow companies' position on releasing their bows. They have a whole marketing strategy around releasing in the fall of the year. Don't ask me to tell you what that is because I don't completely understand it. You won't find too many retailers in the country that like it, but apparently it does work for them because they continue doing it. But
Right.
we will have some bow releases at the show this year. In fact, um, here first, Bowtech is going to be releasing some flagship bows at the ATA show.
Nice.
Martin Obsession will be doing the same thing. So there's still new product being released and accessories. It's still the primary place to release new accessories.
Right. For sure. Yeah, for sure. And so, just to explain to folks right quick that might not understand, well, why don't all the bow companies release at the ATA? Well, they used to, but I'm just going to put this in plain English. Like it, love it, hate it. Doesn't really matter what your feelings are about it because it's true. If you're a bow company and you're going to release all your new bows at ATA and your competitor releases their new bows in November, dealers are going to they're going to spend a bunch of money in November, and then when it comes time to talk to you, they're going to be like, oh, I kind of already allocated a bunch of my budget for these bows 2 months ago, so I'll bring some in. I'm just not going to bring in as many. It's competition. It's
Mhm.
competition, folks. That's the only reason. It has nothing to do. Yes, if you're a stalwart brand like Hoyt or Matthews, you're going to have your loyalists. Yes, But in general, this is a competitive and it's a timing thing. And these manufacturers it's not a want, they need to get their hands on as much of that potential revenue as they can. And so releasing early, because I can remember when the releasing early thing didn't happen. And so that is basically why that's happening. Just going to be honest with you guys. And so with that being said, you brought up the date. I'm not suggesting the ATA happens in June. However, what are your thoughts? Because, like you said, the bow companies are releasing in November, and a lot of folks aren't really super happy about it because, one, they don't get their bows in November. Number two, 85% of our industry is still whitetail hunting side anyway. 85% is still whitetail. What do you think whitetail hunters are doing in November? They're whitetail hunting. And so, what are your thoughts on, if obviously you can't force the bow manufacturers to all release at the ATA, but what are your thoughts on, moving that timeline? Because all of this backing up of the timeline was all surrounding the ATA. It was all to become pre-ATA. Everything was, because all the stuff used to be released at ATA and then companies started backing up to get an early pinch on it. And it worked, but now it's months, it's months ahead. And so what are your thoughts? And you can either endorse or decline even the concept of it. But it's my personal opinion that bow companies in particular releasing in June would be better.
Yeah, that's a big issue, Greg. We have talked about that in the boardroom quite a bit, and it's interesting to get perspectives from retailers and manufacturers on the best time of the year to hold the trade show. It's in January right now because 25 plus years ago when it first started, that's when all the product releases were. So that's when the trade show is. Well, so the simple question is now that the bows are being released in November, why don't you move the show to November or October? Well, it's tough for the retailers to come to the show because
Can't.
that's their busiest time of the year. There's too much foot traffic in their stores. They don't want to leave at that
Yep.
point. So it doesn't work for the retailers. For the manufacturers whose whole production year right now centers around um, releasing bows in that, let's call it November, roughly November timeframe, for them to change their production schedule and move it to May or June or July or August is is a proposition that none of them in the discussions that I've been a part of want to remotely entertain.
Right.
To say nothing of the how do you do that? Do you do it gradually? Do you do you do you move all of your November releases to May of the next year? Well, if you do that, your finances get crushed because you don't have any of those November orders.
Right.
It's all moved to the next year. So it's a what works best for the retailer doesn't for the manufacturer and vice versa. So we're kind of stuck. We're still talking about it. That's the good thing. But for the foreseeable future, which is out through 2028, we're committed to early January.
Yeah. And that is the structure. I mean, basically, and I've thought about this at length, we would basically need a gap year. You couldn't go from October, November to the following May, June. You would have to gap that next year. So it would go, just use this year, folks, this upcoming year. So we're not going to say you would have to basically gap the next year. So it would actually go from October, November of one year to May of a year and a half away. So you would have to build in a year gap there for inventory purposes, it'd be a complete restructuring. So
Mhm.
what's your Jeff Poole, not Jeff Poole, the president of the ATA? What's your personal opinion on what you think it would do for both the organization, for retailers? Because for dealers, generally speaking, it's crickets for them in May, June. So it would give a bump to that. They would still be busy leading up to and during hunting season. That wouldn't change. but it would give them that bump in the middle of the year financially to probably help a lot of them get through that. As far as manufacturers, well, excuse me, it would just be a matter of having that gap year to adjust. But what's your personal opinion on a scenario like that?
Well, you kind of, you what you just said makes the most sense overall. The manufacturers would disagree with that, of course.
Right.
The retailers, that May June time frame is ideal for them for all the reasons you just said. For the manufacturers, the idea of a gap year would be devastating to their books. But logistically, how do we make that happen? Um, we can't, as we've already talked about, we can't, as ATA as an organization, we can't mandate when your new product release. So it takes one or two or three uh, of the leading companies to make that decision and make that leap. Everybody else will follow. It's the same process that got us to November releases, just in
Right.
reverse.
Right. Literally.
Uh,
Literally.
yeah, but that has to be done organically by the companies. We can certainly promote it, but getting that first company to take the leap, that's even a bigger leap than asking them to introduce in January versus November, for the reasons you were talking about earlier, where the retailer's already spent all of his dollars in
Right.
November, doesn't have anything left for January bow purchases. Well, it's magnified come May when not it works well for retailers because it's a light foot traffic month, May, June in their shops. It also means it's very low cash flow months.
Correct. And I mean, and that's one of the things is from a manufacturer standpoint, and you're right. They're it's not like you're gonna have people, Hoyt, Matthews, Easton, Victory, all these AAE, all these companies aren't going to be lining up to be like, yeah, let's do that tomorrow. However, um, one of the other things I think it would do, because like right now, and this is not to pick on any particular company, it's a lot, it's most, but when they release their bows October 15th or November 1st, they don't have, if you go down to buy one, unless your dealer pre-ordered the preview pack, you're not, you still got to wait.
Yeah.
So if the manufacturers were to use that gap year, and back in the day, bow companies didn't release a new bow every single year. Some of them would add a trinket here and there, but so I
Mhm.
don't think the gap year would necessarily be the worst thing in the world because, especially at this point, Jeff, technological improvements are incremental at this point of our history.
Right.
Physics has entered the chat. And I'm sorry, folks, y'all are why. Like the bow companies can't make huge improvements because you still want it to shoot 340 feet per second if you got the juice for that, and you want it to drive like a Cadillac. And physics says nope. And so that's why we're kind of in this, I don't want to call it a lull. It's a lull. That's why we're in this plateau for technology and bows right now, and that's why the changes are very, very small. So I think now is not now like today, but I think in this current era, I think now is the time to start looking at that because the gap year would be easier than ever because of the small incremental movements. But um, that would then allow, if they were to shift that manufacturing pressure, if they were to release in May, June, customers would be getting bows before hunting season. And then all of a sudden your hunting season has a different look when it comes to the the new product.
Well, you're right. I mean, it works for the consumer, at least the bow hunting consumer,
Right.
and with the possible exception of out west, if you're able to actually um, get your bow in May, June, July, you're going to be ready come hunting season that year. So there's a lot of pluses, but that's a giant leap
It is.
for
It is.
manufacturers. And you touched on something else that I think is worth noting in that one of the toughest things for manufacturers these days is that they are under immense pressure to come out with a new flagship bow every single year.
Yep.
And it also goes to your point about where we are with the plateau, the innovation plateau in compound bows, vertical bows, is that we're seeing improvements maybe from year to year, every couple of years, but very rarely are we seeing what we would classify as innovation
Correct.
at this point. So, and I think that's because of that immense pressure on the manufacturers to come out with a new flagship every single year. That's really where so much of their time and attention and engineering focus is going towards that this year's improvement instead of the larger innovation.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, and folks, you might not like what Jeff just said, but he spoke truth. And none of this applies to target archery, by the way, people. So don't ask about, well, when would target bows? No one
Mhm.
cares. Target bows would still come out November. Well,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm a target guy, Jeff. It's
yeah.
true. No one cares. Target bows would still come out in December. Just
Hmm.
that's just what it is. And so, but that's the exact truth of the matter. And that is consumer driven. It's the same reason that I can remember 20 years ago, target bows were loud. They didn't feel so super soft in your hand. And then consumers, as they started, they're like, oh, well, I want this target bow to feel like my hunting bow. Well, a nitro fuel dragster or a NASCAR car doesn't drive like your minivan. There's a reason. There's a reason. Those are built for something totally different, but the consumers have forced manufacturers to go to a target bow that feels like the hunting bow. And I don't think it's been good for target bows. I'll just be honest with you, but that's a whole nother podcast. And so, yes, it would be a seismic shift. And I think at some point, whether it's in our lifetime or our careers, Jeff, I think that shift is going to happen for the sustainability of everything.
Hmm.
If you look at golf or if you look at a lot of these other, industries, their timelines are a little bit more in line with their peak for their sport. Just be honest.
Yeah.
Whereas with archery, we're a little bit off with that. And like I said, we're still new at this. Don't think, and so these other sports have been doing this so much longer, but archery is still a little bit behind the curve there. So I think at some point, not 2028, folks, don't get your panties in a bunch, but I think the conversation about a shift like this to a more appropriate timeline for everybody's interest is probably going to happen. So you mentioned something that I wasn't really sure I was going to talk about, but since you said it, I'm going to go down that rabbit hole. And you said upright bows. So let's talk about the non upright bows, crossbows. They're not going away. They're a huge percentage of the market. And this is obviously going to lead us to FET, your favorite topic in the whole wide world, I know. Um, and so crossbows are not going away. I can remember when they were kind of the third wheel, but they're now half the market. And so talk a little bit about, and this is the part of the conversation that not everyone wants to talk about. And FET is just one part of it. But take a massive brand in our space, True Ball Excel, easily dominate the sight and release category. They're the 800-pound gorilla in the room. They have what do they have to do with crossbows, which are now they have nothing to do with crossbows. And so my question to you is, as an entity, how are you navigating? And we can get into the conversations about hunting seasons and when they should be able to hunt and when they shouldn't, whatever.
Hmm.
That's all personal preference and personal opinion, and we all have our own. That's really not the topic of this particular conversation. As it comes to the ATA, how are you navigating having now half of the market, probably going to be more soon, in crossbows, as you navigate under one roof where everybody is together?
Yeah, that is. that's the gorilla in the room in a lot of conversations. And let me start by saying that just to be clear that ATA and ATA's position does recognize crossbows as legitimate archery equipment. So want to be totally upfront on that. With crossbows representing, as you say, 50+% of the market, um, it's very unwise to just turn our backs on crossbows. We
Right.
must pay attention to them. And so when we look at what data and what information is out there about crossbows, because let's face it, everybody in the archery community has a distinct position on crossbows. You either accept them or you hate them.
Right.
I think what's missing there is love them. So you either accept them or you don't recognize them as archery and you don't want them in any part of an archery season or a competition or what have you. But based on what? What is your position based on? Very little data out there. So we commissioned a study a year ago on the crossbow market, the crossbow consumer, the impact of crossbows in hunting over the last 5 to 10 years. Um, that study is going to be released at the ATA show this year, and it's the most comprehensive study that's ever been done on crossbows. Now, like with any study, you've got folks who can look at the data and how the data was derived and say, ah, that's BS, and completely discount it, in just that quickly.
Yeah.
However, this is a 170-page report. Uh, it it went in depth into I think it was 12 states, looked at all kinds of data on the consumer and the consumer's behavior and activity uh, the lethality of crossbows, the impact on bag limits and length of hunting season and so on. And again, that's going to be released at the ATA show this year. But the genie's out of the bottle. It's not going back in. Crossbows are here, and I think the more we know about the market, the consumer, the more the better prepared, the better intelligence we'll have to deal with the crossbow market as it pertains to the vertical market
Right.
in the years ahead. Because as you've seen, more and more states are allowing crossbows during the hunting season, and when that happens, we just see a boon in crossbow sales in that state.
Right.
And at the retail level, for the next couple of years, they'll be selling more crossbows than vertical bows in those states.
New York just made them legal, and I have friends out there, and they're like, people are waiting at the door
Yeah,
to
yeah.
get a crossbow.
Well, let me give you a little nugget from the from that study talking about who's buying these crossbows. The study shows that 79% of crossbow customers first owned a vertical bow. So that's a little only 19% uh, bought a crossbow as their first foray into archery.
Folks are not going to like that.
Well, that's exactly because we've been operating for so many years on presumptions and anecdotal evidence of the three people that I know that hunt with a crossbow and their background and so on. So, this is real empirical data
Right.
that we can use, or we can discount it.
Right. No, first of all, I like the interjection of humor. You're good at it. Keep that shit up. I like that.
Yeah,
Just because you're president of the ATA doesn't mean you can't have some humor in there. So I
exactly.
like that aspect. No, it's 100%. And like he said, when we start talking about, the three people I know, I hear people on the West Coast that are like, oh, the deer numbers and this and that and the other, and they talk in totalities, and I'm like, bro, go to the Midwest. Like, what are you talking about? There's states where you have to kill a doe before you can even kill a buck. Like the insurance companies, this is a joke, of course, but insurance companies damn near have bounties on deer's heads because so many cars hit them in the
Mhm.
Midwest and out east. What you experience in your circle doesn't represent the totality of the situation. And if you're on the left coast or you're whatever, whatever, and you're like, oh, deer populations, no, 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 no. Maybe your deer populations, but that's the problem is people don't have access to that information. And you're right. 79% of people that bought crossbows already had an upright bow. And so medical issues notwithstanding, I guess that forces me to ask this question. It seems to me like the recreational component is going to be what suffers. Yes, I'm sure there's data in there, and you're not going to share it now, no matter how many times I ask, because if I was you, I wouldn't either, on the actual harvest side of things. But let's talk about that aspect of it because I think it goes without saying, and I'm not anti-crossbow. I think they should have their own season or be with muzzle loaders? Maybe probably on paper, but I don't have the empirical data to make that statement. But the numbers would kind of support it and the availability to be competent with it quickly. But that's a whole nother podcast. Um, but from a recreational standpoint, and once again, this is going to get into some manufacturer crossbow reliability, sustainability of the product conversations too, which I
Mhm.
know neither of us want to touch with a 10-foot pole, but we're probably gonna. I think it's safe to say, and it's not to insult anyone, but the recreational component of crossbow shooting is not even close to the recreational aspect of upright bow shooting. Meaning, you're not going to take your crossbow and go shoot 150 arrows a day. It's probably not going to make it. Whereas I have bows in my garage. I have a Matthews Apex 8 and a Hoyt Vantage Elite Plus that are old and they easily have 100,000 shots on them. And they're fine. The Hoyt's been dry fired 7 times because I train people to take bows apart with it. So how how are you as the ATA going to address the recreational side of half of the market now not being as engaged in the recreational activity of shooting a bow for fun or for culture or for practice versus upright?
Well, that's part of the concern that most people have about crossbows and how they're changing the market, they're changing participation, to say nothing of game laws and that kind of thing.
Right.
If we take a step back and draw some parallels, and we can only do this to a degree, I understand. If we draw some parallels to crossbow shooting to firearm shooting, rifle shooting. Um, we start to get into long range rifle shooting, where you're making these minute adjustments and changes that that make a difference when you're reaching out there 400 or 500 yards. Now, 400 or 500 yards with the rifle, would you say that that's maybe the equivalent of 100 yards with the crossbow? I mean, at what point is that a potential market for recreational crossbow shooting is long distance shooting? Um, at what point does the technology, the innovation with crossbows, allow for accessories such as, a new trigger group in there that's going to make a difference the way it does on the firearm side? So when we talk about innovation sort of at a bit of a plateau on compound bows, I don't think you can make that same argument for crossbows. I think we are in the innovation phase for crossbows, and we're seeing that innovation year in and year out. So where does that innovation take us? Um, I don't know, but if you think about it in some different terms or from a different perspective, we can see where maybe people that shoot crossbows will shoot them more than 3 or 4 times a year before they get into their tree stand.
That was a spectacular retort. What I dude, recognize game. That was a spectacular retort. And now that I'm thinking about it, you're absolutely right. Uh, and I mean, look, like right now, like props to Bruce Cole. I can remember years ago when I was doing Bow Junkie full time, he started a cross, and I don't know if I think it's still there, but they started a crossbow class in Vegas. And Greg Ritz, Hunt Masters, one of the most premier hunting guys ever, who's I think probably Mission Matthews crossbows top guy. He came and shot it. And I can tell you this right now. I have never ever in my ever life in archery, ever, not once ever seen a crossbow shooter of any caliber that could stand on the line at 20 yards and hang with Bodie Turner. Ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't, and I've said that before, but I've never truly thought about it in the context of what you just said. And so now I literally want to have someone put, because we know for a fact, Bodie Turner, Matthias Fullerton, they can stand there and shoot 30 arrows into a Vegas round and it's 3 holes. Just boop, 30 X's, 3 holes down there. Crossbow shooters aren't doing that. So now that you said that, I hate you for this. Now I want to talk to someone that puts a crossbow in a shooting machine and sees what they're even capable of. Don't shoot 1,000 grain bolt.
Mm-hmm.
Don't like make it realistic. Now, yes, the arrows that these guys are shooting indoors are not hunting arrows either. So compare apples to apples. But now that you mention that, are crossbows, is crossbow technology even capable of shooting 30x Vegas rounds, period? So you've kind of turned the whole recreation. Now, of course, we can go to the fact, and someone's going to post in here and say, well, Greg, you're not even shooting scores like Bodie and Matthias with the same equipment. Yeah, you're right, because I'm not good enough. But that's not this conversation. And so as we transition to the recreational side, we're basically talking about folks that go to the club or folks that go in their backyard and shoot
Mm-hmm.
30 to 50 arrows a day. Crossbow guys generally, and gals generally, aren't doing that either. But you have introduced a very interesting concept in that, are we comparing plateaued upright equipment to infancy crossbow equipment? And if that's the case, you as the quote unquote, manager of this situation from a trade show perspective, how are you going to navigate that in the interim?
Well, that's the $64,000 question, I think, and really was a big part of the reason in commissioning this study on crossbows, because I think that's where it starts, trying to gather as much information and data and make intelligent decisions, um, understanding where we are, where we've been, and trying to help us determine where we can go, what the opportunities are on the crossbow market, because up to this point we've just been looking at it from a hunting perspective,
Right.
and I think there's much more to look at there. Now, I don't want to get anybody's panties in an uproar either. I'm not um, promoting or pushing one over the other. But I am saying that if ATA as an organization does recognize crossbows as archery equipment, which we do, and we all can acknowledge that they're here to stay.
Sure.
We I think we ATA is doing a disservice to the archery community if we aren't trying to lead on the whole issue and concern of crossbows, and both now and trying to be forward looking 5 years and 10 years from now about what new opportunities the innovation with crossbows might bring about.
Yeah, I mean that's actually that's super true. And I mean the other thing, and folks, I'm not going to say any names because basically it's most all, but there's a reason that a guy like me, myself, I could not get a crossbow and go shoot a full field round with it. It's probably not going to last. So there are equipment restrictions on that number of arrows. I'm not a crossbow expert. I only play one on the radio. I've literally shot a crossbow like 3 times my entire life. So I'm by far no expert. But I do know, historically speaking, crossbows do not have an extended lifetime, an extended life period of durability. Um, there's just so much stored energy. There's just a whole bunch of stuff. So, um, from an equipment standpoint, does the ATA have any interest or capacity to address the durability side of any equipment that the ATA governs?
Well, we do have technical standards, technical guidelines. We do take positions on certain equipment standards. Crossbows, I think that's part of the innovation phase that we're in with crossbows, where there's still a speed race going on there, and the amount of um, the amount of stored energy that the equipment has to be able to maintain, and how long can it do that?
Right.
So I think that is that's part of the innovation phase that we're under. And can we get crossbows to be um, as durable as 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 compound bows, as durable as recurves and the rest. Um, yeah, there's a we talk about crossbow users pulling their crossbow out and shooting it a couple of times and getting in the tree stand, and maybe not using a crossbow every year. But being knowledgeable of your equipment is huge when we're talking about the durability and longevity of the equipment as
Right.
well. I mean, you have to know how to use it, know how to maintain it, um, know how often you need to get those strings and cables changed, and be able to spot
Right.
potential issues and problems. So there's an education component there for crossbow users as well.
Right. Well, I mean, and I like to use the nitro fuel dragster analogy lots of times, and I'll use it again right now. When a nitro fuel dragster takes one run down the track, they rebuild the motor before the next run.
Yeah.
Now, it's not saying you want to shoot a crossbow once and have to take it to the shop, but they're not, they have so much stored energy in such a compact frame, and there's so much going on with a crossbow that I don't think we're probably going to get, not with these ones that are your 500, like there's some of your Excaliburs with the standard reflex lip. Those will
Mhm.
last a long, long time. We are referring to your 400 to 500 foot per second, ultra cammed, reverse limp. Like we're talking about modern, you know, crossbows. And I just don't know as if you're ever going to get those to last as long as like, I don't think you're going to get a crossbow with that currently to last 10,000 shots. There's just too much going on
Oh
there.
yeah.
It's,
Right.
it's
Right.
too, it's too hyper of a mechanism.
Yeah.
Shit's going to break down, and that's just going to be the nature of it. But from a, I mean, and look, folks, let's be honest. Hoyt has a dry fire requirement for their rigs. It's not like the ATA can look at all the other bow manufacturers and be like, you guys need to do that. So it's not like the ATA can dictate or mandate certain things, but the technical board and the ATA themselves can certainly have an opinion on any piece of equipment that is, hitting 100% failure rate. I mean, they can certainly have an opinion on that. So, you know, as we start talking about that, that takes us to the inevitable FET conversation. Um, yeah, right. And folks, look, I could talk to I could talk to Jeff about tariffs. Tariffs don't have anything to do with Jeff or me or the ATA or the manufacturers. That has nothing to do with any of that. It has everything to do with global economics, of which we are all subject to. Um, it's no different than over the past 40 years when OPEC oil does something and the price of diesel changes, or when we sell off our oil reserves and then we don't replenish it. So there are so many things, or I don't know, people burning down millions of chickens on purpose so the cost of eggs go through the roof. I digress. But there's so many things globally and within our system and the global system that fluctuates the cost of all of our goods. I don't care if it's cars, tires, eggs, gasoline, diesel fuel. I don't care what it is. We have just been fortunate in our industry that, generally speaking, our normal cost of doing business, insurance, materials, labor, have really all we've really ever had to be exposed to at the customer level. Like the ATA's not really ever had to deal with this. There's been tariffs forever, but it's not been prohibitive. And so the fact that now tariffs are a topic, no, they're not. It's just finally the same shit that's happened with oil and all kinds of other industries has just finally come to us. So calm down. I'm not even going to talk to Jeff about tariffs. There's no reason. There's nothing he can do about it. What do you want him to say? Oh, that sucks. Cool. Next topic. FET, however, that's a different thing. And so I've talked to Jeff about this before when the ATA, way back when, had an FET table out in the hallway. And there was an IRS person there, and every person who had a booth in there, he would verify that they were FET compliant, and then you could go do your booth and stuff. So as we talk about crossbows and some of these other categories, and it's without contestation that a crossbow is going to have less FET applicable items on it than an upright bow. That's just true. It's just true. There's no rest. There's no release. There's no lots of things. There's no peeps. There's no stabilizers. That just is what it is. And so let's talk about that, Jeff. I know that you guys have put in some effort to do your best. Someone's always going to get through the cracks. Let's just put it that way. But you guys have been doing a lot more to make sure that FET compliant people are the only people under, regardless of category, are the only people under the roof at the ATA itself. So talk a little bit about kind of your focus on the FET side, protecting legitimate manufacturers, and how you guys see that benefiting the industry as a whole.
Yeah, FET, and let me start by saying I'm going to try to keep this uh, fairly brief because any discussion on FET can put people to sleep very quickly. FET is a requirement
Yep.
for certain archery equipment. In a nutshell, it's the bow and everything that attaches to the bow. In a nutshell, there's a few exceptions. But it is a requirement. And when you start looking at some of the accessories, there's an education component for a lot of companies, particularly new companies, in their requirement to pay FET. Now, we have IRS revenue agents at the show. Their job is not necessarily to be policemen and verify that everyone is paying FET, but to look for primarily new products, new manufacturers, new exhibitors, and the products that they have. And from an educational perspective, making sure they know that which of their products are subject to FET and which are not. Now, federal excise tax, for those that don't know, think Pittman-Robertson Act way back, where the industry voluntarily agreed to pay roughly 11% of the price of the raw material for the assembled price
Right.
for the goods. And 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 that 11% goes back to it goes through the IRS, it goes to the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Fish and Wildlife Service recycles it back to state wildlife agencies, and roughly 50% of state wildlife agencies' budgets come from these FET dollars. And much of what they do are benefiting hunters and shooters and conservation and participation programs and that kind of thing. So we like to talk about it in terms of the conservation community being largely self-funded through these FET dollars. Our efforts more recently have been focused on um, direct to consumer sales from offshore companies.
Right.
So when that sale comes in through an Amazon, let's say, it's going directly to the consumer. It's not being handled by a distributor or a retailer. It's going directly to the consumer. And the way the laws are written around FET, the consumer, the first buyer in the country, is responsible for the FET tax. So you buy a dozen arrows from an offshore company, um, it arrives, you're supposed to pay FET tax. There's no mechanism in place for the consumer to pay the FET tax, so it goes unpaid. And that puts that offshore, that foreign manufacturer selling directly to the consumer at an unfair advantage over our US companies.
Right.
And that impacts both the manufacturer and the retailer because neither one of the US manufacturers or retailers is getting the sale of that product. And they're able to undercut the price of that product because they don't have to pay that 11% FET.
Right.
So we have been focusing on that effort. We've got some legislation in Washington. We have a bill in the House and a bill in the Senate that we think we can get passed in the next year in the current Congress that will level that playing field for U.S. manufacturers and force foreign manufacturers selling directly to consumers. If they're selling through, it's called an internet facilitator. So think Amazon, think eBay. Then the way our legislation is written, it would make Amazon or eBay the importer.
Right.
And then the importer would have to pay that tax. Now, Amazon and eBay are just going to force the seller, the foreign seller, to pay those dollars. So it's they're not actually paying it. It's just changing the mechanism. But the end result is this unfair practice that is putting U.S. manufacturers and U.S. retailers at a disadvantage has to get changed. And we think we can do it through this legislation in the next year.
Good. And I mean, yes, and yes, of course, it's a U.S. focused thing, but it's really just a legitimate thing. There's
Yeah.
manufacturers that aren't in America that do business here and they do it legitimately.
Yes.
So, yes, of course, it's going to benefit American companies or domestic companies the most, but really it's about legitimacy. No one here cares if you're a company from another country and you're selling your stuff here and you're doing it the right way and you're legitimate. Come on, do business.
Yep.
It's the non-legitimate side where it erodes all of that. So I'm happy to hear that. I know the FET conversation is, and yeah, you made a joke about it putting people to sleep. The problem is that's the problem. People have been asleep and not understanding what the FET is actually for or why is something that I think a lot of, not everyone needs to have a degree in tax law so they understand all the nuances, but it is definitely an important factor of that. So I'm happy to hear that you guys are doing that. I mean, I've seen lots of things at the ATA in the past that were a little bit disruptive when it came to certain folks getting boosts there, but I'm happy to hear you guys are looking at that. So let's talk about the Rushmore Rumble a little bit. Um, I think it was a natural progression to kind of start commingling the two. This goes back to our recreational archery versus the hunting side. And um, you know, while target archery is certainly not what keeps the lights on in archery as a whole, it is certainly a huge part of the marketing mechanism. And folks that don't understand that, just the old NASCAR mentality. What wins on Sunday sells on Monday.
Mhm.
That's true. I don't care who you are. It's what wins on Sunday sells on Monday in archery as well. And so let's kind of talk about that integration of, I think that the Rushmore Rumble's up to like 375, almost 400 people registered, which of course that'll get a bump last minute. That's normal. But let's talk about kind of the expectations from your side. Um, what what necessarily were you um, whiteboarding, or what were you hoping that the collateral benefits would be of kind of this collaboration?
It goes back to the decision to add consumer days to the show. A lot of talk around bringing consumers onto the show floor was around adding a day for consumers. Well, if we're gonna go that route, and that's a big step. Um, we're not just gonna dip our toe in the water and hope we get a decent attendance over one day. So I went to Bruce Call and said, listen, we're strongly considering these consumer days. What do you think about bringing a tournament in and co-locating it with us? And Bruce he's ever the showman.
Yeah.
So he recognized right away the benefit to both the show and the shoot. Um, so we've added 2 days for consumers, and we've overlapped that with the shooting tournament. Bringing the shooting tournament in does several things for us. As just the trade show, we've been facing increasing criticism of being just a bow hunting show.
Right.
Um, that's, that's kind of legitimate, but when you look at the retailers that are coming to the show, and most of them are selling 95% to bow hunters, I can kind of understand how that shift would take place. But we still understood that we need the recreational shooter and even the competitive shooter. We need that presence at the show.
Right.
And if we were going to add a consumer element to the show, let's jump in with both feet. Let's open the doors to consumer days by already having a couple thousand people there for a shooting tournament. Between the shooters and the family and friends they bring with them for not only the Rushmore Rumble, but S3DA's Indoor Open, that's a couple thousand people that are on the show floor before we ever sell the first ticket to the show. Thus, really solidifying a solid attendance for the consumer element of the show and bringing onto the show floor a really solid percentage of target shooters to really offset that just a bow hunting show
Right.
criticism that we've been getting.
Well, I can remember back in the day when they had the 100-yard broadhead shoot in the hallway, and that was huge. I mean, that
Yeah,
was huge. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know how big your shooting area is there or how long it is there now, but might not be
Well,
that, you know.
that's a great point. Great point because we've gone from one event to six events this year, but it's the first attempt at this. So we are eyes wide open. And I think there's so many additional things that we can add to this week-long celebration of archery. The first half of the week is pretty much dedicated for the trade, and the second half is for consumers and shooters. And the second half, therefore, is much more of a entertaining um, event. And
Right.
so when we're looking at entertainment and what we can bring into the show to provide that entertainment to the showgoers, I mean, the possibilities could be endless, but I think many ideas will be generated from this year's show.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, so, with that being said, let's talk about this real quick. And, it's one of those things where you're in the midst of trying to, you have a tough poll, and I think you're doing very, very good so far. So I appreciate your efforts. But let's talk about the notion of how you get manufacturers and dealers back to the show in mass. And obviously, not every manufacturer's lost, folks. Y'all know who we're talking about. Calm down. But dealers, whether it's the pricing or whatever, it's my opinion that at this stage of the industry, we, you actually, since you're the tip of that spear, and everything that happens, good or bad, is going to be on your head, and you already know that.
Yep.
But how I think it's imperative that we, I'm going to drop my boy Cam Haynes's book here. Be How do we make the show undeniable? Cam Haynes' book can be bought on Amazon or any other book retailer. Anyway, shameless plug. I'm joking, but it's actually a good book. But how do we make the ATA undeniable so that you don't have to ask manufacturers to come back? Manufacturers are telling you they need to come back. And you talked about the extended days and the 6 events and the shoots and the trade shows and the customers and all of that, but this all sounds like a recipe. And so how are you guys looking at this from a standpoint of, we need to make the ATA show undeniable so that folks know they have to come back?
Well, the first thing we have done over the last couple of years is listen. We've done a lot of polling. Um, we've done a lot of anecdotal conversations, getting one-on-one with a lot of our manufacturers and some of our retailers. We've discussed it in the boardroom. We have 20 board members that are both manufacturers and retailers. And the what we've heard from manufacturers and retailers is that we don't want to do more shows, we want less. We don't want to spend more money, we want to spend less.
Right.
And so that's really why we didn't just add a consumer day to a 3-day trade show.
Right.
We kind of went in and made sure, based on what we were hearing, that we can create enough value for the manufacturers to do just what you said, to feel like we don't just want to be here, we have to be here.
Right.
And so if we can create this environment now for manufacturers, the exhibitors, instead of just doing the trade show for 3 days, get what you get and move on. We now, before the trade show even opens, we have 2 buying group shows going on the day before the show opens. And then we have a 2-day trade show, and then we have a 2-day consumer show in the Archery and Bow Hunting Super Show. So for the exhibitor, he has one shipping expense, one travel expense, one setup expense, and is able to do 4 shows with the same setup under the same roof.
Right.
So that's efficiency. That's bringing more value to the exhibitor. The companies that are not there, hopefully they will be watching this year, and it looks more attractive to them because, again, instead of just one trade show, they now have 4 shows with the same expense they had with just that one trade show. So if we can attract a lot of these exhibiting companies, former exhibiting companies, back into the show, attract new companies into the show, now we're creating more value for the retailer, and the retailers will be coming back into the show. At the same time, we have something in the second half of the week for the end user, the consumer, the shooter, the bow hunter, the even kids with the S3DA shoot going on there. So we feel like we've touched every corner of the archery industry. We've been able to do that by bringing more value to the manufacturer, more opportunity to get more target archery involved in the show. And again, it really hinges on the retailers coming to the show every year. It all starts with the ATA trade show, and we've built out from there. So we must maintain the integrity of the ATA trade show. We're committed to doing that.
Right.
This being the first year of all of these changes, yeah, of course, I'm hopeful that they all work out great. I'm prepared for
Right.
something to not work out all that great here or there, and we'll fix that for next year.
Right. Absolutely. No, and I mean, and That's the thing that really has been missing, is the listening part and the understanding that this is not just an industry trade show anymore. I mean, if you look at other industries, motorcycles, dude, those are going by the wayside. It's now more of an interactive show that's, yes, business to business, but it's also consumers. It's also the pomp and circumstance. It's more of a festival these days.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you guys are recognizing that is huge. So just a couple more questions and I'll let you go. I appreciate you spending some time with me today. Um, let's talk about, historically, and I know you hear about this all the time, and that is the cost of manufacturers to attend. And look, folks, I would love, and I'm sure Jeff would even love more, to say, hey, we're putting the ATA in this place. It's non-union. You can haul your own shit in. It's not going to cost you $2,500 to ship it there and then $2,500 to have some guy on a forklift move it 100 yards. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not aware of any buildings like that large enough to hold the ATA. I'm not a fan of that either. I don't know anyone who is, other than the union. But what else, and you did say, you have the one free night thing, which is pretty cool. But as far as the manufacturers go, what's the ATA doing to try to, and you can't cut it all the way down, of course, but what are you doing to kind of mitigate or to control some of the costs that did there for a while get kind of out of control?
Yeah, we hear that a lot. The cost of doing the show, the cost of the booth space is just one of many costs in doing the show. Um, to send staff out to ship your display out and all of your display items. Um, and just the cost once you're on site, as you said, the cost of moving your freight from the loading dock to your booth space sometimes is more than it costs you to ship it across the country.
Yep.
And what we as ATA have been able to do, or in some cases not been able to do, we have not been able to increase our space rates because it's just adding to the expense. And expense is one of the primary uh, obstacles, hurdles, challenges that we hear from exhibitors all the time. It's costs keep going up, can't afford it. And the business of producing a trade show has gotten more expensive. The contractors moving the show in and out, their prices continue to go up. Rental in the convention center prices continue to go up. Hotel rooms continue to go up. Food, etc. So we have held our booth space rates for the last 13 years. I don't know how much longer we can continue to do that, but at we just cannot add to the challenges that exhibitors have right now by adding to that expense.
Right.
We have tried to make it as painless as possible for the retailers, but most of the revenue coming out of that show is on the back of the exhibitors.
Right.
So we have to be mindful of that. We can't just blindly keep adding and adding and adding to their expenses. And, whereas we're not the contractor charging them, the contractor works for us.
Right.
So we're very careful about what price increases are allowable each year. And that's all done by multi-year agreement.
Right.
When it comes to doing the show in Indiana's a right to work state. Doesn't mean you don't have unions.
Right. Right.
The work rules are a little more lax, but the workers are still in a union.
Yep.
The contractor is still obligated to pay union scale. So that adds a lot to the expense. But like you said, there's no building large enough in a city that doesn't have those factors in place. So that's something that we were aware of. We've got to continue to deal with. Some of these cost factors we can influence, others we can't. But what we have done this year, as I said earlier, was try to create more cost efficiency by now doing 4 shows instead of one.
Sure. So last question, how are you going to navigate the transition from business to business, the ATA trade show, to the super show, where generally speaking, at most consumer shows, people can sell product? Um, And look, folks, let's just be honest. That's not to say that at the normal ATA show, if a dealer goes by that a dealer can't buy all the shit in a company's booth, but he picks it up when the ATA show's over. That happens. No one cares about that. But what we're talking about when this transitions on for the weekend for the Super Show is actual retail sales. So how are you guys navigating that transition?
Great question. Probably the number one question from retailers who have a legitimate concern that ATA is promoting a direct-to-consumer sales channel,
Right.
which we are not by any means. In fact, we have gone to a large degree trying to support um, bow shops, archery shops with a campaign to our exhibitors, um, promoting the sales channel of selling through the retailer. Now, you talk about the success of TAC events, got great vendor areas at TAC events.
Yep.
Bow companies are there, the accessory companies are there. There's some selling going on. But not everybody's selling. Bow companies aren't selling. Aero companies aren't selling. Some accessory companies are selling, and I expect those same companies that would sell at an event like that to be selling at the Super Show.
Yeah.
Um, Now they've been doing it for years. They don't really. It's I guess it's they've kind of grown some acceptance from dealers. They don't really hear much about it. But for companies that have an established dealer network, the vast majority of them have no interest at all selling around their dealers.
Right.
As we talked earlier, all of these major manufacturers in their marketing and advertising campaigns, they are directing their campaign to the consumer. And they're trying to drive that consumer into the archery shop to make the purchase. Same thing here. That's all they want to do at the show is generate consumer demand for their products and drive them into their local bow shop to make the purchase. And
Right.
in fact, some of them have been creative enough to come up with some incentives to do just that,
Yep.
to give them the coupon or the buck slip, drive them into their local bow shop and get whatever the offer is, 10% off, $10 off, or what have you. So is there going to be some selling at the show? Yep. Yeah, there will be. And we will not be the product police trying to determine who should be selling and who's not selling.
Right.
We won't do that. But I don't think that you're going to see any company selling at the show that's not already selling at consumer shows and TAC events and ASAs and so forth.
And you literally just hit the nail on the head. At indoor nationals, Vegas, Reading, every ASA, every IBO, every Iowa Deer Classic, every TAC event, archery companies sell at all those events. Not everyone. You're not going, you're not going to go to the Super Show at the ATA this year, and you're not going to go buy bows at every other booth. You're not going to buy, but this, to Jeff's point, he hit the nail on the head. Some companies go to all these shooting events and sell product, and some don't. You're not going to come to this event and buy the guy who has deer blinds is not bringing 30.
Right.
And if you want to buy the couple he has in the booth, probably too late because a dealer probably already spoke for that. So at the end of the show, he'll be picking that up. And so, I don't think that the selling at this event is necessarily going to be that big a deal. And I think it'll probably only be a big deal for people that don't attend national tournaments where this is 100% normal. Is Lancaster's going to bring their big giant trailer that has all the product in it? I have no idea. I don't know. I know that as much as that's a sales mechanism, it's also a service mechanism. Lancaster's has generally one person in there who's only fixing screw ups, fletching arrows,
Yeah.
and working on problems. And so from that aspect, I'm going to be curious to see how that goes over as well. So I appreciate you spending some time with us today. Any final words, and let us know where everybody can keep up with the ATA as we move into 2026.
Yeah, I tell you, we're what 2 weeks away from show week, and for anyone that's interested in attending, if you qualify for the trade show or you're interested in the consumer show, atashow.com. That's the place to get all the information, ticket prices, information on hotels if you want to stay the night, show hours, and so on. And Greg, I appreciate the time and the conversation as always.
Absolutely. That's Jeff Poole. He's the president of ATA. Like I said earlier this year when I did the podcast with him and Bruce, I'm happy, but I'm relieved is, and I know that's kind of a weird thing to say, but I am relieved to see that the ATA, or at least the person in charge of the ATA, is reading the room. Um, Better late than never. I mean, you guys that follow me know I'm not going to mince words on that. Do I wish this had happened, that they would have started reading the room 10, 12 years ago? Of course, we all do. But they didn't. But Jeff's here now, and the things that he's working on and the directions that he's going, I think are the right direction. Are all of them going to work? Probably not. No one bats 1,000, but that's not the point. At this stage of our industry and at this stage of what we're dealing with as an industry and a sport, the efforts and the awareness of the right direction to go, to me, are most important. And being on the right path is the most important. And yes, there's going to be missteps. There's going to be home runs. This consumer show part of it could be a home run. The Rushmore Rumble could be a home run. No, I do not think, especially not the first year. But do I think that having the Rushmore Rumble at the ATA is going to increase participation in the Rushmore Rumble? Yes, I do. For a couple reasons. One, location. And I love Yankton. Don't get me wrong. I was pretty involved with the inception of the Rushmore Rumble. But just the location of the ATA and having the Rushmore Rumble there is going to give people a lot more access to the event, especially after the first year. I think this first year, you're going to have a lot of archers laying back in the cut, just kind of seeing how things go. But I think the second year of having the Rushmore Rumble there is really going to be the tell. It's not going to go from 400 to 1,000 this year. That's not happening. My opinion, as long as it has the same or more number of people, then the Rushmore Rumble collaboration will be a success. Year 2 and 3 is really when I think you'll see the growth there. So I appreciate Jeff coming on. That's going to be it. I know out here on the West Coast, it has been raining like you cannot believe. So if you're out there driving around and you're in any inclement weather, just be safe. We don't need, any bad news out there. There's enough weather, and driving's treacherous enough already. So everyone be safe out there. Hope you guys have a great Christmas. You guys know the drill. We want to hear from you, not about you. And as always, everybody, love, peace, and chicken grease.